What's your approach when it comes to legal tech?
Just the power of making something transparent.
What have been the biggest challenges? Have there been any war stories?
I think at times where we've come undone is when we've not understood the vision.
I actually reference Revolut. I talk about how Revolut have sort of changed the business model of banking. And do you think there will be such a company in the legal industry?
There's been this discussion for many years now as to whether or not the current law firm model works. And the reason why I don't think it does is because...
How do you stay sane and how do you stay on top of everything?
As I always say, don't hide behind your computer screen. Sit down with that person you're working with and ask them, what exactly do you and why do you want to achieve it?
Really excited today to be with one of the first employees of Revolut for the last 10 years since the pretty much day one of what's now a global fintech phenomenon. Tom, would love for you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the journey you've been on.
Sure. Hi, my name's Tom Hambrett. I'm the Group General Counsel at Revolut. I joined Revolut in 2017. I was the 23rd employee at the time, and now I am one of 13,000 globally. Revolut is a fintech. It's all things money. We're trying to simplify how you can spend, save, and send money abroad. We're multi-currency. We're multi-jurisdictional. Our products are multifaceted in how they can assist and empower you to sort of govern and take control of your financial life.
So what's it been like? You were there as the first lawyer on the team. I think it was like 28 people, you told me, when you started. There's now 10,000 plus people in the company, 160 lawyers.
Yeah.
What has that been like? What's the evolution been like?
Look, I mean, it was building from necessity, really. In the beginning, when we were a small team and we were a much simpler product back then, it was designed, we were structured in such a way that we were there to enable product moving quickly and servicing our customers and making sure that our customers got the best product and that the product was compliant with the obligations in the markets that we were operating in. As that product developed and became a little bit more complex, as we decided to go into different verticals such as cryptocurrency, credit, insurance, business banking, we needed to essentially specialize a little bit. And that meant hiring and focusing on people that could provide that expert advice in that field. So that meant really looking at how the organization is structured, how product owners and engineers and developers that work with them work and interact day to day, and how we can best leverage the use of legal advisors and professionals to complement what they want to achieve. So that meant building out practice groups within the legal department that were focused on particular areas that we saw were potential pain points or blockers for our product owners.
And going from 1 to 160 and I believe 150 countries you guys are in with all different regulations and your highly regulated industry that you're in, what have been the biggest challenges and have there been any war stories on that journey?
Plenty of war stories. I mean, I think in over the space of my time at Revolut, we've had global pandemics, we've had Brexit, we've had Wirecard blowing up, we've had launches and failed launches of multiple products. We've obtained our own licenses, we've terminated partnerships, we've migrated customers from entities. So there's been lots of challenges, and each of them are unique in how you have to respond to it. No one single existential threat. And I used to joke with my friends and family that I'd at least get 3 or 4 a year was the same. But what it taught me was the need to have a very disciplined structure around how you work as a team, how you escalate and flag issues. And more importantly was the need for a culture within the organization, and particularly the legal department, that really prided itself on solving problems and system thinking. So not just accepting that this is how it's done because it's always been done this way, but really sort of challenging how we could better provide legal service and how we could better provide the advice and the support needed to get the product out there. I think if we just accepted the status quo, we wouldn't be where we were today. And so that also meant a real emphasis on hiring and finding the right people with the right skill sets, and more importantly, the right mindset and energy to contribute to what we were trying to achieve. I don't think we would have achieved as much as we would have if everyone that we'd hired hadn't had the same belief and passion in the product.
And is that true to purely the legal team or Revolut?
I think it's Revolut generally. I think that every single individual that's worked at Revolut, past and current, is someone that has embodied our values. And I think we're very, very strict with making sure we make those right hires. It's not a workplace for everyone. It's not an organization where you can come and have a job for life. You have to be expected to continue to perform at a very high level. But if you enjoy pushing yourself and you enjoy actually seeing where you can go and taking on more problems and taking on more challenges to solve, it's a place that's incredibly rewarding.
Finding talent is something I hear is a big challenge for many legal departments, especially as we're looking for slightly different skills as maybe we did a few years ago. I mean, how do you go about finding talent? Where do you get them, and what sort of skills are you looking for?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because in the early days, trying to attract top lawyers to a startup that wasn't profitable, that was constantly in the media for what was perceived to be the wrong thing, that was challenging the status quo, was something which was quite hard, because we had to invite lawyers to take risk, and lawyers typically don't like taking risk. They don't want to leave their jobs in private practice with their good earned salaries and their safe progression paths and take a punt on something that may or may not be there in a year's time. So it was really about finding individuals that were intellectually curious, that had that resilience and also that grit. Yeah, the ability to sort of not get deterred when things got tough. And actually take feedback on and improve and really challenge and push themselves with how they've been legally trained to apply that learning to what we're trying to achieve.
And you mentioned taking some risks, and often legal is seen as a blocker to innovation within companies, and Revolut has moved at such a fast pace. What has been the sort of risk versus innovation reward dynamic at Revolut?
I think it's a healthy balance at the moment. I think it always has been. We're very sensible in how we approach risk. We quantify everything. So we're able to put a number on it, be it a pound or a dollar value, or be it a risk in terms of customer outcome and how that would impact upon the experience that we'd like our customers to experience with the product. We don't settle for seconds. So for instance, if it's a trade-off between shipping a product and partnering with someone that we're just not comfortable with, then we'll actually delay the shipping of that product. And so we'll either build the tools internally, or we'll take the time to get those own licenses that are required for us to provide the service in-house. But, there's plenty of examples. I mean, I think when we launched cryptocurrency in 2017, we were one of the first, if not the first, fintech in the UK to do so. And many thought it was crazy that an aspiring bank in the United Kingdom was also looking at offering a crypto service product, and whether or not that was complementary or not. I think when we launched business banking as well, people thought it was ridiculous that a company that was only offering an e-money wallet was now looking to service SMEs with thousands of employees. But again, it's that ability to say things are broken. The way that it currently works isn't fit for the customer, and there's a reward there, and you've got to push yourself. And I think in taking that risk, in putting yourself out there, and in showing the customer that there's another way of transacting and dealing with their finances is really important.
Yeah, super interesting. I was chatting with Alison at Dentsu this morning, and she was talking about having an ops team, a mighty ops team, which has really transformed her legal department in a great way, and the sort of benefits that's had across the wider company. How is your team structured? I remember when we spoke before, you spoke about a matrix system. Like what is that? How are you structured?
Yeah, so we've got 10 practice groups, and they're function wide. So if you're a corporate lawyer in the UK or in Australia or in America, if you're a disputes lawyer in Tokyo or in Canada or in New Zealand, you all report into functionally those practice groups. So that's a nice way of centralizing and ensuring the discipline of being a commercial or corporate or disputes lawyer is consistent throughout the organization. They, though, then work within local teams. So we're able from a central position to ensure the level of service is consistent, the tools that they're using is consistent, the way that they provide advice and support each other is consistent across the entire group. But the problems and the questions that they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis are localized. And so they can work within their local teams, report directly to the head of legal in that country or the CEO if he or she is that head of legal. And so they can develop their own way of working, but leveraging off the years of experience that the group has. So from a matrix perspective, it means that I divide my time between week one, which is department sort of work with the practice groups, and then week 2, which is regional work with APACs in the Americas and Europe and the UK. But what's nice about that is it means that there's a diverse range of problems and challenges that we're trying to encounter and fix, but we can also share the knowledge and share the experiences that each of us have had and how we've overcome some of those problems. I think the other thing that's really key is to Alison's point earlier about ops is very early we realized that as a support service within an organization, we weren't going to be relevant if we weren't able to speak the language of our product owners and of our engineers and developers. So that meant using the same tools. So using Atlassian, Jira software and Confluence, using dashboards like Looker, and really actually being able to assign SLAs and KPIs to our lawyers so that their internal stakeholder or their client can actually see the value add that they're bringing.
Mm-hmm. And are you investing in external tools? I know you've built some of your own. What's your approach when it comes to legal tech?
Look, at Revolut, we've always got the view that you have to build. Build is better than buy. And I think that's probably right. We are sitting on an incredible, rich amount of information and data from the last 9 years. So ever since my day one at Revolut, we've been storing and filing all the work that we've been doing, if it's the advice that we've been given, if it's the corporate transactions that we're doing, if it's the commercial terms that we've been agreeing to with all our partners. So over the years, we've got a really great set of data that we can train our own large language models on. And that means that essentially we can build bespoke agents that can help our lawyers with their queries and with their advice and make it just more of a Revolut-centered product. I do think, though, that we're in a privileged position because we're a relatively young company and we've had the benefit of actually storing that information from the beginning. If I was a founder today without a legal team and I was only starting to get into this, I'd want to start probably I probably would look out to outsource that and buy in tech.
Okay, nice. So, of course, everyone can see we're in a slightly different setting to normal podcast today. So, as a guest of LegalTechTalk, you're going to get your hair a little bit spruced up. It's a Friday. I don't know if you're heading out anywhere nice tonight.
Let's do it.
But
yeah.
How are you, Tom?
I'm very well, thanks, Andrew.
Yeah. So whilst we're on the topic of legal tech and building your own, is there like a single piece of tech that you've built that has had the biggest impact across the company?
Yeah, look, I think there's been a few different ones, and it depends on the practice group. So for sure, the commercial scorecard's been one that's been the most easily capable of articulating to the business as to the value add. It's assisted with the time that takes to resolve and complete commercial transactions. And that's a tool which allows us to very quickly, and when I say very quickly, within 90 seconds now, we can risk score any brand new commercial contract that comes in. A very complicated commercial contract with Google or Visa or MasterCard or Apple can be quantified, and then our position, the Revolut position in terms of what we will and won't accept, can be articulated to the lawyer. So the benefit of doing it that way is we're capable of showing where our value add is in this chain. You know, I mean, lawyers aren't there just to sort of move paper around. It's there to help business move forward. And so we're capable of actually putting a number and talking to the business as to sort of what do they want to achieve out of this commercial transaction.
Mm-hmm. And how does the scorecard work? Just for like anyone else that may want to set up their own version of it, like how would they go about doing it?
Well, it took a long time, and it came out of a necessity born from COVID. So it was during COVID when we went through a very long process of reviewing and essentially benchmarking every single commercial commitment that we've ever made. And in so doing, we noticed that there was a huge variance in actually the positions that we were taking, and we couldn't understand why. We then went a level deeper and actually broke down our counterparts into different groups, and we tiered them. And we said, look, tier 1 is the most important based on level of service or those terms that we were agreeing with them. So that's things such as data storage and really material customer facing commitments that we've had to partner with. And then tier 5 is less material or significant and more sort of BAU. Once we broke down our different commercial arrangements or contractual obligations, we then kind of came up with a bespoke contract, which was a risk scorecard based on what positions we would and wouldn't accept. And we quantified that by weighting them. So from a 1 to a 5 or from a 1 to a 10, depending on the clause. That then meant that we could map every other contract against that scorecard and then start seeing trends. And what was super interesting during that exercise was in 2017, 2018, 2019, the very first years of Revolut and Revolut Legal, we were seeing quite high commercial scorecards. And that was because there was an emphasis on getting the deal done quickly and not delaying whatever it was that the business wanted to achieve. It also showed that we weren't necessarily in our younger years in a position to push back. But as we started to mature, became profitable, we had greater sort of substance behind us, both in terms of volume of payments and customers. We were capable of actually start negotiating and getting better terms. That then meant, and you saw a trend in the graphs coming down, we then saw a sweet spot based on each of those tiers as to what level of risk we would accept. And then we've trained our AI co-pilots to actually do that work for us in the first instance. It doesn't mean that it alleviates the role or the need for a lawyer. All that it means is that the lawyer can start focusing his or her time on the things that are material.
It's really, I've not heard anyone build something like this, so it's really interesting. Hopefully people can imitate and build their own. Have you got anything in the works? Are there any new tools or of course AI is evolving a lot?
Yeah, we've got some really cool, exciting things coming up. So obviously the commercial review risk score was just the start. Next is we've got a tool that can assist lawyers with drafting, which is really cool. And that's drafting from our base position. So all of a sudden turning documents, either putting markup in or actually preparing the first draft is going to take a lot less time. And then on outside of the commercial side, we're doing stuff with the product. And I think this is what's most exciting. So Revolut is a very complicated business. It offers a number of different financial services to a number of different types of clients. There's clearly a lot of regulated obligations that come along with providing those services, licenses and disclosures, and ensuring that your products are fit for the market. So And that's even made more complex by the markets in which you operate. So not every single market has the consistent approach when it comes to regulations or law. Different markets require different things, as simple as with respect to terms and conditions. So even in the EU, each country has their own approach. So that created a challenge, but also an opportunity for us to sort of standardize and simplify our lawyers, how they engage with the advice that they're providing with respect to those products. So what we're trying to do there is leverage all the historical advice that we've ever given product owners in respect to a single product and tie that back to our horizon scanning regulatory tools that are mapping what's coming up in terms of changes to the legislation. Those two things together will be able to show where there's potential gaps or gaps to come in the advice and the way that the product's structured. If that can happen in a matter of minutes, then all of a sudden the regulatory lawyer that's teamed up with the product owner will be able to highlight ways in which the product will have to change very quickly. So that's a way of ensuring the legal advice remains relevant and up to date. But then what's more exciting is actually it fast tracks our ability to offer that product into a new market. Because if you've got a market, let's say I offer today credit in Ireland and tomorrow I'd like to offer credit in Australia, I've got the advice and the opinions and the support that the legal lawyers have provided with respect to the credit in Ireland. It's very quick to then map against what the different obligations are in Australia and how that product would have to change. So what I see as potentially being a game changer for us within Revolut Legal is this will dramatically speed up our entrance to market.
You're dealing with an insane amount of things. I don't know how I would do it. How do you stay sane and how do you stay on top of everything?
Look, I don't think I have the answer to that. I think that everyone is different. And I think there's definite times when I've not dealt with or coped with the stress and the challenges and the pressure. And that's normal. And I think you can't hold yourself to the expectation that you have to be perfect all the time. You do have bad days and you have good days. But I think one thing that's really helped me come to grips with everything that I'm dealing with is kind of removing this fallacy of a work-life balance. I think when you introduce the word balance to a phase like that, you think to yourself that you can do it all and you can manage it. I don't think that's right, nor is it healthy, because you start beating yourself up. What you should really, I think, what's helped me at least, is that it's quite fluid and it goes up and down. And what you need to be more aware of is, are you doing the things that you love? Are you busy? Are you working with people that you like? Are you pushing yourself? And I think in all aspects of your life, be it at home or at work, if you're able to sort of be mentally stimulated and engaged and overall learning and working with people that are making you better, then I think you're in a very good position. And I think adopting that mindset and that perspective helps. But it's difficult, and there's definitely times when you do need to step back and take a breather.
You got some triathlons coming out or something like that?
I've got look, the goal is to do a triathlon this year, but I think I've got a couple of long bike rides in France during the Tour de France, and I've got a couple of half marathons. And yeah, I think it's really nice doing exercise to put your mind at ease, and also to sort of just decompress a little bit, and work through all the things in your mind that it allows me to percolate and allows me to think things through. I think if you don't remove yourself, sometimes you're at risk of firing off an email when you should have paused, or sort of missing something, or actually just not taking that moment to step back and think.
Yeah, we've all been there, close to hitting send.
Yeah,
but not. I mean, Revolut clearly do a good job in finding the right sort of talent that's helped them become what Revolut is today. I mean, a licensed bank, overtaken a number of the big banks. It's really impressive story. Just changing it up a little bit. What has been your experience working with law firms, and has that changed, or any sort of external counsel? Like how's that evolved?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I was thinking about this the other day. There has been a shift in the way in which professional services and law firms are dealing with in-house teams. I think that's fantastic, and I think it's been much needed. Historically, the way that the law firms would approach in-house teams was outsource some of your problems to us. We'll then outsource it to juniors. We'll charge you their time for their benefit of learning and upskilling, and then we'll add on the senior associate's time for reviewing that work, and then the partner will do an obligatory 5 to 10% because he or her has to bless it, and then you'll get this big bill at the end of it. But don't worry, it's worth the money because you get to tell your boss or your board that you've got external opinion, and this law firm stands behind it. I think what we're seeing now is, and I'm incredibly appreciative of it, is more agile advice that's a little bit more tailored. I mean, personally, I have a rule within Revolut, which is I will not pay for a junior's time on any invoice, because I'm not in the business of subsidizing law firms training their lawyers. I don't ask our customers at Revolut to subsidize the training for my engineers or developers when they're learning how to code, and nor should in-house lawyers. So I really want the best advice. I want it to be agile in terms of when I need it, and also I want it to be right in terms of, so I want the most senior experience position on it, and I don't want to have to waste time or spend money on iterations. And so it's setting expectations up front. It's being really clear with what you will and won't accept, and then it's being meticulous with what you're being billed, and not taking not letting them add on things like coffees or teas or taxis.
Mm-hmm. It's good advice. I don't know how easy it is to police, but it's definitely good advice. And when I talk about business models to a lot of different people, I actually reference Revolut. I talk about how Revolut have sort of changed the business model of banking, and how Airbnb has changed the business model, like the hotel business model, Uber, Netflix. They've all come in and disrupted an industry. Do you think there will be such company in the legal industry having a similar level of disruption to law firms?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, there's been this discussion for many years now as to whether or not the current law firm model works. I don't think it does, but I don't have the solution for what would work better. And the reason why I don't think it does is because you're seeing it in a number of top-tier firms at the moment in both the US and the UK, where they are pursuing clients that are willing to pay exorbitant fees at the expense of doing interesting, important work. So you've got big law firms over here that say, these are really interesting clients, but actually I'd prefer to work with the PE-backed companies or the sovereign wealth funds or the pension funds, because they've got buckets of money and they don't challenge me on costs. So what you'll see is very talented lawyers will start leaving private practice if all they're doing is the repetitive, boring work that's just billing big hours. there's only so many people that can make partner every year, and the partners aren't going anywhere. So I think something needs to change. I think that the way that it will change is the introduction of more AI-powered tools that will allow juniors very quickly to remove or automate some of the less inefficient work that they're doing, and more of the low-value, high-volume stuff. And there'll be a higher trade or price on actual intellect. And then I think the real value comes from partnering with lawyers and firms in particular that understand the product, that generally deep down get what the business is trying to achieve. I think that's hopefully the model that where law firm go to.
And any piece of advice for any law firm trying to win your business? I don't know if you're settled with the law firms that you have right now, but any advice?
Yeah, look, I mean, we run a global panel. We do that every 2 years. We do put people on and take people off. A lot of it depends on the individual within the firm that we're hiring them for, and their experience, and you know, people do move around, and we get that. I think that for us, we really pride ourselves on aligning our in-house teams with lawyers that understand the product. So I think unless you use Revolut, don't even bother about pitching.
Yeah. Okay. I use Revolut, so you can still speak at the LegalTechTalk. That's good. If you had to rebuild the team from scratch, if you could go back in time, I think, 10 years ago, would you do anything differently?
Yeah, I would. And hindsight's always, you know, a great thing. I think a lot of what we had done was based out of necessity. In the early days, it was survival. So it was really just how do we keep our heads above water? If I had my time again, and maybe advice to anyone building an in-house legal team would be, don't take on too much and start becoming more mathematical and structured in how you deal with problems and actually make decisions earlier. I think the tendency for lawyers were, in the early days, they were kind of the Mr. and Mrs. Fix-It, and they can do anything, even if it's a little bit legal, they can still get involved. They're often got good EQ. They can often double hat as investor relations or communications or other sort of, governance type sort of positions. I'd say that be really particular with what you do and don't do, and start using tools, particularly around tracking performance, tracking time, tracking capacity, tracking workflow, and aligning yourself much closer earlier with the business in terms of understanding the product roadmap, understanding the direction that the business wants to go, and then highlighting and forward planning what are going to be blockers, and then getting in there and unblocking them early.
You've been here on a journey for the last 10 years with Revolut. What's on the horizon? What does the future look like at Revolut?
So, look, I mean, it's super exciting. We've got the UK bank license coming on later this year. The license in Australia will follow thereafter. New Zealand after that. America will, the team there is working hard on a couple of exciting things, which will hopefully open up that entire market. Mexico is going to come online. We've got at India probably end of this year or early next year. So that means a handful of banks all coming online at the same time. So we transition from a financial group with one bank to being a financial group with multiple banks in various regions. So that means greater product depth. So we can start doing credit cards, mortgages. We can start offering transaction accounts that with local IBANs and local payment account features, savings accounts, all in-house. So that means that we're truly now, I think, at an inflection point in the Revolut journey of being able to offer a full service of product for financial products that will enable you to sort of manage your own life within one app, which is pretty cool. I mean, if you open the Uber app today, you can order food, you can order a taxi, you can order a bike. But if you open up the Revolut app, it's literally everything you can do with your money and more. And so that's going to be great. And then on the other thing that I'm really excited about is I think you'll start seeing more of a physical presence for Revolut. So you'll start seeing us on the high streets and at more airports, and that's super exciting. And
That's interesting. And as a business user of Revolut, I endorse the business banking for anyone who's not using it yet. It's super easy and slick. Getting
Really?
daily interest rates. It's like, oh, I can buy more lunch.
Yeah.
That's
It's
cool.
cool, isn't it? I mean, this is the thing. It's like just the power of making something transparent, like in terms of just you then seeing your interest rates and you then seeing and how easy it is to budget just makes you feel more in control. And that's why what's so important with what we're doing is not just transparency, but user experience. So having that ability for and to place ourselves in the position of the customer. I'm a busy small business owner and I've got lots of people to pay and I'm also owed a lot of money and I really don't need to go to multiple tabs or to branches or wait for printed letters. That to have it all in one place is what we're trying to do. And, from the legal perspective, it's just ensuring that how we embrace that attitude as well. So it's very easy to provide legal advice that says, well, you have to put this big ugly disclaimer on it, or you can't do that because the law says you have to be able to provide hard copy in receipts or whatever. But actually, what's the purpose of a law if not for the fact that it's meant to protect the customer? And if you're having to wait for things to be loved, you're not being protected.
Have you ever felt like the legal team has got in the way of this kind of innovation?
I don't think we have. I think at times where we've come undone is when we've not understood the vision. And so I think that's why it's so important. And everyone that works with me and for me understands. I always say, don't hide behind your computer screen. Sit down with that person you're working with one-on-one and ask them, what exactly do you and why do you want to achieve it this way? And often it comes from a very good place of, well, this is how the customer would expect it, or this is how the customer should expect it. And just because other banks haven't done it doesn't mean we can't. So a lot of the time, if there is ever any friction between legal and product, it's because there's a lack of a mutual understanding of what they're trying to achieve. Once you've unblocked that, and you can only do that through often face-to-face conversation.
Has the wider team ever pressured the legal team to take a risk to unlock something good, where it's come back and kind of bit on you guys?
Yeah, look, I mean, that happens all the time. We don't get pressured to ever take a position or provide advice that isn't lawful. But what happens is we are very good at explaining the ups and the downs of a position or taking a decision on. So, and as I said, like business risk exists around us, irrespective of whether or not Revolut operated. So the idea that you have to manage risk or have no risk is ridiculous, because even if you do nothing, there's risk there. And so when you're working with a business that's intentionally trying to provide a really innovative service, you're going to have to encounter and manage the risk associated with it. Often the risk is just because no one's ever done it before. So what we like to do is we like to articulate the known risks as a result of taking a decision and the unknown risks. But the business, it's not helpful just to explain that, well, you might end up in this position, or you may have to pay a fine, or it could be viewed as a contravention of this subclause. What is more helpful is to explain and to put numbers behind it. So, in other words, quantify it. So is to say, look, the risk of not launching this product versus the risk of launching this product and then having it be found that it is a minor contravention because the law is silent and or actually not up to date with how we're providing this service, means that you may have a potential penalty, or the repercussions could be you're told to shut it down, you're told to reimburse the customer, you'll get a fine for the percentage of the revenue generated. But these are all decisions then that the business has to make, and the business has to accept. You just need to inform the business of the parameters within which you're operating. And I think that's the most exciting thing. Again, it's like finding, to your point before about hiring and getting the right talent, it's finding people that are willing and able to articulate the necessity of the risk associated with the services and the products that we're offering, but not willing to compromise on customer outcome. And I think that's a really strong line for us. It's one thing for the business to take risk, but we can't pass that risk on to the customer. And so the
Got to stop there.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So the customer has to know at all times what he or she is signing up to and the costs of those services and the positions that they're taking, particularly when we talk about things that are inherently risky, like trading and cryptocurrency, where there is volatility in the market, where there is an asymmetry with respect to information. And so you've really got to ensure that you're clear and concise with the customer's obligations with engaging with you and having those products.
It's an interesting dynamic, because as a startup that wants to do great things, you need to take risk, but you're dealing with people's money, so you got to be ultra careful about that.
Yeah, you really do, and I always say to the team, there's nothing more personal than personal finance, because everyone's worked incredibly hard for their money, and everyone's putting their trust and faith in you to look after that money, and so that's what's so worrying about the rate of fraud in the UK at the moment. You know, over 40% of all crime in the United Kingdom is fraud. And it's individuals that are getting manipulated by very sophisticated criminals who are going about and making it an industry for targeting vulnerable customers. And so we have invested a lot in fraud prevention, and we've got a lot more to do, and we will continue to invest in fight fraud because it's our obligation, and it's the only way that we can continue to have a high level of trust with our customers.
How do you feel you fare against the sort of established banks when it comes to fraud? I mean, are there stats around it? Is it improving?
Yeah, look, I think every bank has its challenges when it comes to fraud. It's not a single bank issue. It's across the board. It's a sector-wide issue, and it's largely been driven by the proliferation of fraudsters on social media. Google, Facebook, Meta, with the likes of WhatsApp as well, are able to sort of enable and equip these fraudsters with the ability of targeting the financial services system. All banks are subject to it, and often, and what we've seen is a number of banks are involved in a single fraud. So a fraudster will target an individual that will move money from Barclays to Lloyds, from Lloyds to Santander, from Santander to Revolut, and then on to Coinbase. And what we're seeing there is at every single point of that journey, there's been manipulation, and so each bank has an onus and an obligation to each other to work together to fight this and to stamp it out.
Well, I'm glad you're doing your job and not me, quite honestly.
A great example of innovation in fraud and how we're dealing with fraud was we've recently announced in-app phone calls. So that stops individuals being on the phone to the fraudster at the same time as making an instruction to Revolut to move money. Because it blocks that fraudster from actually being on the phone. You can't be on the phone to two people at the same time. So that's a way in which it cuts the chain. And there's that type of innovation, which actually in app first or app native financial services like Revolut, we're able to innovate and provide those tools, which is really cool. The obligation, I think, on all banks is not just to prevent fraud, but to also come up with ways to manage it. So by that, I mean, don't introduce friction for the sake of friction. So if you've ever tried to move large sums of money, often what will happen is you've got to go into a branch, unless you're a private banking client. And then even then, if it's too large, they'll have to call you to read back the account details that you've asked for. And that's friction, particularly if it's time sensitive. And let's be honest, when you're moving large sums of money, often it is time sensitive because you don't want to be moving that amount of money months or weeks in advance. So all of a sudden, the customer experience is actually worse off. The outcome for the customer isn't that great because you've got the stress and the anxiety of moving large money, and then you've got a bank telling you can't do it, and then you've got to wait for a review, then you've got to wait for someone to call you. So there's lots of ways in which financial services need to actually improve their customer outcome. And that means there's risk in that because the bank itself will need to actually take a position of not deflecting liability, which is what they're doing when they're saying you waive all your rights and you can no longer come after us if you make the mistake of sending this to a fraudster. And by the way, we've called you to confirm and we've recorded that conversation. So now the onus is on you. But to come up with actual better ways of dealing with in real time the challenge of fighting fraud.
I've had these challenges as a consumer. I was trying to set up a business with loads of friction, setting up a bank or moving money, or I'm spending a bit too much money somewhere. So my card stopped working, which has caused embarrassment once.
Yeah.
And I've never had this with Revolut. And how have you managed to do that whilst protecting the customer?
Yeah, look, it's not easy, and your experience is fantastic, and I love hearing it. I wish all customers had that experience, and there's definitely instances where we have had to pause transactions, we had to freeze cards because we haven't recognized the merchant. I think what our benefit is just as we've been building these systems and these models, we've been able to do it off a very flat tech structure, and we've been able to use our own data. So that means that all of a sudden we're not dealing with legacy. And we're able to be quite agile with how we kind of move that information around and move those assumptions and rules around to actually better reflect your individual spending habits. And it's that tailored individual risk makeup that we've got of every single one of our customers that means that your experience is hopefully more tailored to you.
And is this something that you've personally been involved with building, or is this your engineers on the ground?
Look, it's definitely not something personally that I can say that I've been involved in, but I sit on the executive risk committee. I sit on the executive committee. We have presentations from the financial crime committee and from a number of very senior professional compliance folk that have done a lot in this space for many years. And so it's really exciting to see them take real thorny, big issues that are very important for a lot of people because it's their money, and come up with new, better ways of dealing with it as opposed to applying the established position.
A conversation that's actually come up a few times recently, speaking to group GCs and chief legal officers, is like having a seat on the board within a company. Are you on the board within Revolut? If so, like how have you managed to get that position? And have you been influential in broader company-wide decisions? And do you have any advice for those sort of aspiring to get to that kind of position?
Yeah, look, I was super fortunate by virtue of the fact that I was a very early joiner at Revolut. So when I joined Revolut, the board consisted of Nick and one investor. So it was just a two-man board. I attended in the capacity as sort of the head of legal, the note taker, the minute taker. And Nick and I formed a very strong bond and have worked closely. And I've always reported directly to him since day one. And so we've got to know each other quite well and respect each other. And so as the board and the company has expanded and matured and evolved, I've been on that journey with him, which is fantastic. And that's meant that I've been able to maintain my position on the board as the company secretary, work closely today with our chairman, Martin Gilbert, and the non-executive team, who are all fantastic and bring years and decades of experience in financial services on both the retail and institutional side. And tapping into that wealth of knowledge is really important. And that perspective is actually something which is really valuable. And so I think getting the right board is fundamental to the long-term success of the business, but also to the stability of that business, particularly a business that's founder-owned, founder-led, and in tech, because you don't want a board that will disrupt or distract what the founder is trying to develop. What you want is a board that's going to complement and provide advice and insight from a different perspective. And so Nick and Vlad are the gurus that run the product, that understand user experience, and that understand the pain points within which and the problems that they're trying to solve for retail customers and for business customers. But the board are there to sort of suggest and supplement and to guide them through that process, but then also to provide a perspective and some insights into sort of what they did with their own companies or in their financial institutions in the past. And so it's a really healthy but fantastic mix. It took us a while to get there. As most businesses that were originally growing through fundraisings. And so we'd have investors come and they'd always say, we're going to write you this big check, but as a result, we'd like to be on the board. And it became a bit of an ego thing because I think it was like a bragging right. You know, I'm on the board of this company and that company, and I'm on the board of Revolut. But it wasn't working for us. And the reason why it wasn't working was there was too many people in the room, too many opinions, and not enough people that have actually done what we're trying to achieve or do. And so that means no one really wanted to get out of the way. So there was distractions, there was noise, and they weren't productive. My advice is to anyone that needs to get into the board or into that space is make yourself indispensable. So when you're working with the directors and the non-execs and your CEOs, take on the work that means that they don't have to do it, and you do it really, really well. And time after time, if you keep making yourself indispensable, then you'll become, it'll be second nature to offer to sort of come along and do this and do that. And can you pick that up? And so over time, you start building a reputation of someone that can get things done well, and can actually align and execute based on the vision of the founder.
Is there anything particularly that a chief legal officer or an aspiring chief legal officer will see across the business, or a view they'll have across the business, that makes them indispensable to the board?
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot of things that chief legal officers touch in their positions, and GCs do, and a lot of that is not just the legal risk. It's more also culture. It's the idea of being a champion of the whistleblowing, conflicts of interest, ensuring that you can thread that fine line between product and innovation and good customer outcome. It's being pragmatic and sensible at the same time as being commercial. So it's understanding what's important for the business as well as the customer, as well as the obligations to the regulator and to shareholders. And so it's kind of like a Venn diagram, and each of these spheres of influence overlap, and you should be in the middle just where they overlap, because you're in a privileged position of being able to talk to all those different stakeholders at different times. And I think that makes you somewhat indispensable, so long as you know how to capitalize on that. As I said, I sit on the executive committee, and we have fantastic presentations from the marketing and growth guys where we're acquiring customers, and we're keeping those customers engaged. We have fantastic presentations from the product teams that show their roadmaps and what they're going to be building and how they're going to be better providing services and additional services like Revolut rewards and eSIMs and all those types of fantastic sort of add-ons to the initial product offering that actually make the customer stick and engage with us more. Now, on the flip side, you then have the ability of negotiating the commercials with all those partners to offer those products. So you actually understand the drivers of getting eSIMs out and the need to, and the commercial arrangements that will allow you to do that. And that means that when you go to the board or when you go to the regulator and you speak about something that's coming up in terms of a new product, you are in a position of both knowledge because you've got both sides of it. It's not just good for a customer, it's also good for the business, and this is how it's going to work. And then if you can articulate that well, you've just summed up in real time something that's probably taken 6 months of planning and thought.
Mm-hmm. A lot of the GCs I speak to struggle to convince the boards around getting investment for tech. And I know you're in a fortunate position, you can build internally. Do you have a view on that, or any advice to those trying to fight for a seat or fight for budget or fight for influence within the company?
Yeah, it's a really hard one, because at the end of the day, we are a service. We're not in the business of legal advice. We're not selling that advice on. So we're not making money for Revolut, as in the in-house legal team isn't. So we do support a number of teams that do make a lot of money for us. It could be the growth guys that are acquiring customers. It could be the products. It could be the commercial guys and their transactions. But we always work in tandem with that other team. We're not capable of solely saying that transaction 100% should be contributed to us. So as a result of that, there is tension. The best way to convince your board or your internal stakeholders for investment in legal ops and legal tech is to show with numbers the value that it will bring. So if it's time or speed to resolve commercial contracts, if it's overall time to launch new products, if it's reduction headcount. So lawyers are expensive. If it reduces the number of lawyers that you'll have, if it actually will work with a number of other products. And that's what's helped us in our journey over the last 9 years, is the fact that we've had to use the products and the systems that our engineers use. So we've been piggybacking off the back of their own investment on tech. So if it's in back office, we're able to plug into that and we're able to use that in real time. So actually, it's not an additional expense for the company because it's already been built or the tools that have already been built, like Jira or acquired. So look around and see what is at your disposal. see what you can do in a rather scrappy way, but to show sort of like the fact that there's a genuine need for this or a case for this, and then to put things in numbers. And I think it's very difficult to deny a business case if it's going to save you time and money and ultimately make people happy.
And do you have a strategy for understanding how to optimize the team or what tech is out there? I mean, you don't know what you don't know, right? So how do you go about that?
I think it's not being afraid to fail. So, but knowing when you fail and pivoting quickly. And so a lot of the stuff, I think the culture within the legal team, at least, is that we respect everyone's opinion. And so everyone is allowed to say what they do and don't like about working with the tool, or even a decision in terms of sort of a structural decision or a way in which people are meant to report or escalate matters. And so we learn through that. So it's, if you say, I don't like using this tool because it takes more time, or actually why it doesn't make sense that I have to go out of the system to use this tool and then back into another system, is there a way in which we can make it easier or streamline it? All of those types of things are real-time feedback. And so when you get enough of that, you can decide whether or not you should continue or to drop it. So that's the first one. The other one is not overcommitting early to things. And so in that regard, I'd rather be stretched, and I'd rather myself and my team to work too hard, but to be solving problems that are making a difference, as opposed to us not working enough and having all this fancy, shiny new stuff that's actually not really adding any value. So it's you, in a little way, you've got to enjoy the pain, and you've got to enjoy the struggle, because actually only through that you'll start getting the benefits of realizing actually what's going to move the needle and what's not.
I was hoping you'd say, I go to events like LegalTechTalk, you'll find out everything you are. But your answer was much better, so it's all good.
Should definitely go to LegalTechTalks.
Tom, it's super impressed with the work that you're doing. Thank you so much for joining us, and see you in June.
See you in June.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.